What's up, guys? It's the real main event, the Rogue Soldier, the essential John L. Crossfire.
And I'm Mrs. Crossfire.
And once again, you guys are tuned into Caught
in Conversation. Shakalaka-laka.
What's up, guys, and welcome to episode 84 of Caught in Conversation. It's been a few months since I've had an episode. I do apologize for that. You know, health, life. This will drop exclusively on YouTube. I'm working on getting my Spotify, Podbean, Google Pod, all of that fun stuff back up to date. All things going well. Should be up and running by mid to late July. Hopefully sooner than that, but that's my current deadline I've set for myself. But it is what it is. This is live on YouTube, or not live, but streaming on YouTube when you're hearing this. And I'm back with a bang. This is a huge interview for me, at least. I am talking to the head of OPW Cam Vale, and we're talking all things OPW, all things Impact Wrestling. Of course, this is here to promote, hype up the huge Impact Winter Down Under 4-day spectacular. Was meant to be New Japan, became Impact at the last minute. Me and Cam will talk all about that, and once again, I do thank Cam for giving me his time. The song of the week for this week will be We Own the Night. Of course, that is the Impact theme song, We Own the Night, by Bernard James Perry. I think that's the name. Hopefully I didn't butcher it, and it's also featuring a couple other people. But yeah, We Own the Night, the Impact Wrestling theme song. It's an absolute banger, dare I say, mwah, chef's kiss. And if we're speaking chef's kisses, how about this week's match of the week? Just last night, as I record this, a few hours after talking to Cam, I was watching Genesis 2009 to get myself into the mood, get myself into the TNA Impact spirit, and I watched Alex Shelley versus Chris Sabin in the finals for the then vacant X Division Championship. As I said, chef's kiss, all of that jazz. But we're going to get straight into it here today. I want to, again, the cracked record, you're going to hear me say it in the conversation, you're going to hear it in this intro, probably going to say it again in the outro. Just thank you to Cam for giving me his time. Let's make an impact with Cam Vale. No, you're all good. There's a bottle of water there if you want it. I know you've got your coffee ready as well.
No, I'm all good. All good to go.
But obviously, I reached out to you, Cam, probably, about a month ago? Probably about a week or so, maybe a few days after it was announced that the tour was happening and it was Impact and yada, yada, yada. Obviously, with the intro, I'll put everything in about why we're here. But you're a very busy man. Very much a businessman. I think that's probably the easiest way. I
definitely
had a little squiz at your LinkedIn. I felt like that was probably the best way to get to know you and what you're all about. And you've got your hand in basketball, hockey, 2 different codes of football with multiple different teams. I saw that you were a financial supporter of the Melbourne Storm, and as a Parramatta supporter, that still hurt me. I had flashbacks to 2009 there, especially after last year's terrible performance in the grand final. But we're here. Now you're a part of Wrestling Cam, and if we can bring it all back, what was your earliest wrestling memory? Have you always been a professional wrestling fan since you were a kid, or?
Yeah, no, definitely been a fan all my life, and so earliest memories, for someone who's in their youthful mid-40s, I'm going to sort of refer back to Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant, and WrestleMania is really the first distinct memory. I mean, it starts blurring in when you watch other. WrestleManias and other things. So, but yeah, no, always been a fan, and had met many different people as you work in sport, and you sort of, it's an industry that's got a lot of tentacles and in different areas. So I'd met a few different people along the way in the wrestling space, and when I left baseball, took some time out. I didn't think this was the path I'd be going down, but it's sort of. Yeah, it's found me, like it does others, I think, in some industries where, your passion sometimes, or something you're really interested in, can connect professionally. Obviously, it doesn't happen for many people, but, it's sort of happened organically, although I probably always thought if I've worked in sport this long, at some point I'm going to try and do something in this space, whatever that is, whether it's something small or a little bit bigger than what I probably thought with this one.
I mean, I feel that. I kind of the same. When if you asked me at 12 years old, I would have been like, I'm going to main event WrestleMania, and then you get older and realise that that's not very realistic. Yeah. But I'm still somehow doing stuff in wrestling, and I sent out the follow-up email and, basically shoot your shot. And I never thought I'd be here with the owner of a massive company that's in charge of this huge tour we're about to talk about. But
well, I'm not too massive. Impact's the big brand, and obviously we started with New Japan, so two very, very good, very big brands. So I'm just a very small, humble part of it with a few others that are really chipping in at the moment.
Well, he's the middleman, but he's a very big middleman in the grand scheme of things for this country. But that will trickle into the next lot of questions, and I'm very ADHD, so this will probably go all over the place. So you can answer them in whichever order you want. And you bring up the Impact, you bring up the New Japan, but how do you then go from being a fan to how does OPW then, one, become a thing to then now you're helping run what was meant to be New Japan, then, I don't want to say, the backup option, but for lack of a better term, New Japan, the dates, whatever, stuff happens in the business, you had to compromise. And within the space of a couple of weeks, you have put together this, and I'll say massive tour because it's, they're going to be in town for 4 days, but there's 3 days of public, events plus the small community events on the first day. That's a huge deal for a regional town. And obviously, the New South Wales government have thanked the heavens for them and all their lovely contributions. But how do you go from I'm a fan, I'm doing all of this other sports stuff to now running OPW and then partnering up with all of this? Like, how does this massive thing come to be?
So it's I'd finished. So I've worked in sport for over 20 years in full-time roles, and in April 2021, I finished with Baseball Australia. I was CEO there. I had a great 4 years. Was intending to stay on. I actually, feel a little bit bad in, I'd extended my contract about 8-9 months earlier, but had, many people are going to say, so the COVID impact for me was just, it was a huge battle for us to get through that season for us, and I just ran out of energy. So I said to the board, look, it's probably been coming for a while. I'm going to take time off and think about what's next, but genuinely take time off. So as I took the time off, I was not doing anything. I was really keen to just take a break, and I started to sort of tease out some ideas to go, well, if I want to do this break a bit longer, I might pick up some smaller, part-time work or consulting work. I will, what would I like to do? And one of the key people I'd reached out to was a gentleman who a lot of wrestling people would know called Michael Webber from Fight TV. And, I just reconnected. I'd met him a few times, and I said, look, if you've got anything happening. And so we'd had some chats and sort of, doing a couple of very small things. And it sort of morphed into, as I took the time off and started to think, well, my background has been running sports, particularly when you're working in sports like hockey and baseball, smaller sports here. You're looking to find ways to commercialise your product and build events. And so I'd had, and even back to North days when we did the deals down in Tassie, I'd had a lot of deals and partnerships with government delivering events. So I was starting to morph into that direction for a few different sports, and it just sort of, just crept up on me to go, well, why wouldn't wrestling be in this space? We've seen WWE do the big tours, and they've been back before. But there's a lot of opportunity in Australia, particularly coming out of COVID, to, why do government fund events? Because they want to promote cities, they want to promote growth, they want to bring people into these cities, and they also want to create events in markets that often are overlooked. And so I'd had a lot of experience in that space. So a few different things, and it just sort of happened organically, and then I started to reach out with a bit of help from Mike and a few people I knew to a few different organisations, and just started to meet people. And again, it's the nature of sport. When you've been in it for a while, you get a lot of no's, but you get used to that, and when you get the yeses and the connections. And so I had, sort of focused on, certainly, WWE are going to deal with the big, promoters
and stadiums and everything.
Yeah, and I had some really good chats with a couple of people at AEW who were really helpful, but ultimately it led to meeting Nick Aldis at an NWA event, and most people know Nick, so now with Impact, had a really successful career, and he and I sort of just connected on the sense of, I'm the business guy trying to do something in Australia and doing it a bit differently. So I'm trying to bring a traditional sports model, if you like, to how to build an event. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to do that, I should at least have my own brand. And so, for a whole range of reasons, I'd been influenced to use the word Oceania and then pro wrestling, and not really knowing where and what that would be. But let's have a brand that's better than Cam Vale or just a management brand. So, and anyway, so as that was happening, sort of just doing that, and connected with Nick, and he gave me some great ideas, because I think a lot of people if we follow wrestling, then a lot of times you follow the business of wrestling. So. Yes. And it is easy to make assumptions. And I've learned in every sport I've went into that you have to, learn, you take the skills that you've got, but you listen to people that have been in the industry, and you filter what you like and what you don't like and what you think is correct. And but yeah, Nick gave me some great insights. Said you just meet different people. Then I met Conrad, and we went down the path of StarCast. But running parallel to that was meeting Fri-Sat at New Japan.
Yes.
And so, again, with these different connections, and Fri-Sat I've got a lot of time for and a lot of respect for. And, we'd connected. And, again, it was like, all right, well, can we bring New Japan here under this model? And, again, the events model, government funding model, it's in a lot of ways is no different to a sponsorship model, but government have a different purpose for, they're not selling cars like Toyota, but they want an outcome from it. And again, so we obviously, with all these different conversations, I sort of had two that came together at the end of last year. Was we want to try and bring StarCast to Australia and do something with that. And at the same time, we had announced New Japan with the New South Wales government. And, it's a regional events program. So it's a matter of trying to find a regional event location. It's not Sydney, it's not Melbourne, it's not Brisbane. Not that they're not great cities. I've lived in Melbourne most of my life. And but as I said, wrestling's also, from a business perspective, and I say this very respectfully, wrestling is a strong niche product.
Yes.
So what I also learnt, and it's taken really 12 months, is trying to talk to government about the benefits that wrestling brings. It's a very strong product. And as most wrestling people might know, when you deal with non-wrestling people, you can get all sorts of different reactions. So
Yes.
when you're talking the business sense, then you're trying to manage through, the definition between sport and entertainment and where this all sits and fits. But then you start to draw them to the positives: strong fan base, strong broadcast, great athletes. You leverage and you lean into some of what people would say would be the negatives about wrestling.
Yes.
I see as the positives.
Absolutely.
So, I've had great sports I've worked with, but some of the talent or athletes, you want to get them to do some promos before a big hockey match, baseball match, or AFL match. They're not that keen. Got to prepare, got to get ready. And coaches often can shut these things down. And wrestling's totally different. Fri-Sat, Nick, Conrad, all the people, like, it's an industry to promote, and therefore, so there's a lot of strengths to it. So it's effectively like a long answer, but essentially it's sort of morphed from the skills that I had and from the experience I've had in the different industries, sort of going, well, why wouldn't this work for wrestling? And I respect all the Australian promotions that run, the typical promotions like MCW and PWA, and there's a heap of them out there, Riot, and I want them to do really well. My model's just slightly differently, sort of going, all right, can I focus on 2 or 3 marquee events? What does that mean, and how do we make it work from an event perspective? And again, there are Australian promotions in Melbourne and Sydney and Brisbane and Adelaide, Perth. I don't want to compete with them. That's not what this is about. This is about trying to take events into different markets and try and show. I think there's and then you can ask the next question. I think there's 2 really key parts. There's the fans that want to see it, and,
Yes.
and hopefully will go, depending on where it is. And I appreciate not everyone can go, but we also got to start thinking about. I think every sport I've worked in, how do you grow your fan base?
Yes.
So I think wrestling can appeal to many, many people that are not natural fans of it, and therefore whether it's a once a year thing. Or it's something they go to and they want to see again. And I think some of these regional markets can open those doors as well to make a good business model. I mean, it's I'm not Tony Khan. I'm not. I can't do this and just throw away the super or the mortgage or whatever. Like, I do have to try and build a business model, and therefore within reason, it's I've got to try and make the dollars and cents sort of balance on both sides.
It is interesting that you mentioned those other promotions, though, because we will get into it. But you say you're not trying to compete. Absolutely not, because you're showcasing a nice handful of those talents. But it's kind of crazy to me how, it makes sense. It's life, it falls into place. But how you go, hey, I'm going to try this. And then all of a sudden, by happenstance, you just meet Conrad, Nick, Fale. That's insane to me. Like, I saw, obviously, before it was changed to Impact, that Fale was just in town doing local media, and I was like, the one day I didn't go with my wife to do groceries, I could have bumped into him on the street. I'm like, that's nuts to me. For it's not a small town, but it is still a regional town, as you say. But it's just crazy how something like that just.
Well, and part of that is just the industries I've worked in sport. You often need to. You just knock on doors. You're if you're sitting back in the AFL or the NRL, people come to you. Even if you're a small, your North Melbourne Football Club or, an Olympic sport like hockey. I've probably worked in more, even though they're big sports and big clubs, challenging brands where you've got to try and find a way. So sometimes it's a confident naivety, if that's a phrase, that you just go, what have I got to lose, and let's have a crack.
That's fair enough. Now, with the talent announcements here, you've announced the entire lineup for the meet and greet. Is that final? Is there anyone else being added to that? Or are we mixing those people with the Aussie talent that was just announced?
Yeah, no, that should be the final list. You never know with these things, but and I don't want to jinx anything, but at this stage. And we had to, when we made the shift from New Japan, we, again, trying to find a lot about this model is to prove if it can work.
Yes.
And then look to develop it into something bigger, whether that's New Japan or Impact, and also scalable. So it might be different than talking to a MLW or, clearly an AEW and what they're doing. They would look to.
They're just about to run Wembley in London.
So I think it's all, it's you got to put your toe in the water to a degree to make, to work out what works, what doesn't work, what you can do better, and timing wise, yeah. So there was never about 30 or 40 talent coming out. It was all about trying to find and I use this phrase a lot to people that know me and know what I'm trying to do. It's trying to build quality over quantity. So it's because, look, the reality is most people know it's incredibly expensive to get, people to this country and back and all sorts of things that come with that. So, I'm trying to show the wrestling companies as well who haven't really toured here much. Let's be frank. I think when people look at the history, we've had WWE house shows, 2 major events in 20 years, and New Japan, I think back in 2018. So it doesn't happen a lot. And I think we've got to try and find a way here in this market to go, well, why can't you do a bit more here? And we'll probably touch onto it, but I see a lot of real sport similarities with what we should try to do with wrestling.
Yeah, I feel like Australian fans in general, unless you're like a super freaky mark like myself and my wife, a lot of Australian wrestling fans, they do look at wrestling, whether it's WWE or AEW, in a very similar fashion to they do like the NRL or the AFL in that aspect, especially with what they see on TV compared to live. Because there was probably, I think, about 4 people that both my wife and I were like, damn, instantly in our minds, we wish we were here. But
yes,
as I look at the list, I haven't written down all the names, but as I looked at the list, for such a short amount of time that you had to put it together, and again, that was, I assumed, one of the reasons. You should never assume things, but I assumed that was the reason. You can't be flying out all these people because at the end of the day, as you say, you're the middleman. You still kind of, you need to make some money back on your front. So
yeah,
but and the talent that you have here for such a short notice, I'll say it, it's got me marking out. I'm excited to meet Moose and Eddie Edwards and all of them. But
look there, and let's not forget Impact's a big brand. So there's probably the 30 or 40 wrestlers and talent and managers and other things we could have looked at. But yeah, a lot of it was on the short notice. A lot of it was, again, let's see how this model goes, the quality over quantity. And one of the big ones, as I sort of said before, why I don't think I'm competing with anybody else is I see the opportunity for Australian wrestlers and announcers and commentators and other people as part of the model that I'm looking at, in that I'm not a wrestling school. I don't develop talent, and the talent here and the promotions do a really good job. But we've got to try and find ways to link the Australian talent here, and potentially the brands, but the people that are here, to these international brands. Because my experience in sport says that we are often that far away from everybody else. We get overlooked way too easily. And I saw this all the time in baseball, and, not being harsh on Americans, but, if there's a great Australian player, there's an A grade, emerging talent in Australia, and there's a B grader in the US, they'll go the B grader most time. And most of the time, because they just don't see them live, or they don't see them in person, they don't get to meet them. So, I'm trying to find a model here that can link, what the ecosystem is here from an event perspective into some of these brands. And I think that's and again, when you build events in Australia, particularly with government, and that's not just always state but local government, or even some commercial partners, they want to see what's the Australian impact as well, excuse the pun, but there's that, that's like the intangible to it. What else can occur? Is there a chance for for Australian talent and people in the industry to get an opportunity? So you can't guarantee these things, but my model sort of is that we want to attempt to do it in a way that, as I said, is, and I give a lot of credit to Scott Demore at Impact and Vale with New Japan when I was working with him, is that they both see that as well. So it's like
both fantastic, business minds. Like, obviously, I'm more on the fan side. I've been lucky to have a small foot in the smaller indies of the business side, but just from on the outside looking in, you can tell that those guys are obviously doing something right, and there's a reason that they've made all these contacts with yourself and people in other countries as well. But
it's where we, and I think the other thing is the wrestling companies know how Australians from a fan base over-index, which is a business term, but essentially, if you're doing a pound for pound list, we would be, pretty close to the top.
Absolutely, and I don't think that's being biased either. Like, look at what we have.
We just have a lot of fans here. We have a lot of interest in it, in the sport, and therefore, But again, then you just got the challenge of the logistics of making these events work. And as we know, wrestling, why this is a 4-day model is, again, that's the typical model when you try to build events. You're not, if you're putting on a super show, great, but even then, you're getting talent out earlier, whatever the sport.
Flying them in, making them wrestle, and then they've got to fly home sore as hell. And
and again, it's like, okay, why can't there be some community engagement to this? Why can't there, how can you make a model that is, not, so disrespectfully, not a house show, maybe not a pay-per-view, but something in between. And so, I think all I'd say to people is that, the aim is that we're having a crack here. There'll be a lot of things we learn that will make it better for the future. There'll be a lot of things that go well. There'll be stuff that won't go well. And but it's trying to do something a bit different because, there's, as we all know, there's a lot of good brands out there, but, it's WWE certainly do dominate the market, which is great to create awareness for when you're in my shoes, to then talk to sponsors and all sorts of people, government. But then you do have to do a bit of the sell as to, well, where do these other companies sit and just how does it work? It's not, wrestling's almost not like any other industry. It's not like the NBA and go, well, there's the NBA and then there's these leagues underneath it, because the leagues sort of compete.
NFL,
but,
XFL,
SFL. Yeah, but they're also part of the ecosystem. Yeah. So, again, I think I've gone down that, the top 10 list of international wrestling companies, and there should be a model for them to be here one way or the other. Maybe it's going to be different for different brands and, and how it all works, but that's what I'm going to try and explore.
Well, even with, just real quick with the logistics before we move on, there's talk right now with the NRL, the 18th team. Papua New Guinea is the front runner because it's easier to get from there in New Zealand to Melbourne, Brisbane, whatever, than it is to get to the other side of the country, just in Perth. So,
and I think it's also too, you've got to, we are a country, and therefore, whether it's the PNG piece, say for NRL, would make a lot of sense to go new fan base. It internationalises. So when you're in this, and let's be frank,
so even it's a somewhat similar situation though. At least
wrestling should be treated like a sport for the business side. 90% of what it does. The advantage is it's got the entertainment part. Trust me, I wish I had some of the entertainment parts on the sports I'd worked in. Would have made life, and in fact, a lot of sports should think about wrestling as a product to follow from the fact you do need to entertain people, right? It's not just as simple as going and watching a traditional sport, and it appeals to the traditionalists, and everyone else is going, that was as boring as
just recently, right? they cut off the Living Ends performance halfway through on the TV broadcast, and there was people that were traditional football fans going, I came to watch football anyway, they shouldn't be there. And I'm like, yeah, but this is why they're doing this. Football does it. Boxing and MMA have kind of stole the wrestling format to an extent as well, NFL, but
MMA, absolutely. I mean, that's why has it changed from cage fighting and some of the derogatory terms
they
it
more
used to
want
have.
to see who Conor McGregor's going to cuss out next.
Yeah, but hey, look at governments backing those brands, right? Like that wouldn't have happened 10 years ago.
But just real quick, I'll throw in a little bit of a fun question. It's part of one of the core questions I always ask when people are on for the first time. Hopefully, this is the first time. Hopefully, we'll get you back in. A couple of months.
I'm not that hard to find. So yeah, please.
But you harken back to the days of Andre and Hulk Hogan, and that kind of gives me goosebumps because that's the stuff that my dad taught me about before he passed with Macho Man, Jake the Snake. What is your all-time favorite wrestling match, Cam?
You do think about that as you watch some of the matches. I love that match for the theatre of what it was. I think that is, wrestling and telling.
Slammed him for the first time in quotation marks because it was like the 10th time.
Telling a great story. And another one for me in that era was the Macho King and Ultimate Warrior. I get my WrestleManias confused.
It was either 7 or 8 off the top of my head. But
love that match and
loses, reunites with Elizabeth.
And just. It was one that really jumps out. But to be one of the real favourites for me is definitely, and maybe it's my favourite match is Brett versus Owen. I've got two younger brothers, so I was cheering for Brett. But I'm
the older brother, but for some reason I always seem to sympathise with Owen more. I don't know.
Again, to me that's it was a great match, told a great story. Everyone got into it, and. And in modern times, I've been lucky to go to like this year's WrestleMania was a tremendous card. I mean, there was the Rhea Charlotte match was
absolute
phenomenal.
Fantastic match. I think everyone expected it to be great, but it still exceeded expectations. But if we were going Impact specifically, do you have an all-time favorite Impact match?
Yeah, so I'm definitely one that enjoyed the Impact era when because it used to be, I think it was Fuel TV that was on in Australia, so it was on pretty regularly, and obviously their numbers were really really good, and they're still I know people can shit can wrestling that are wrestling people, which always amazes me, but still doing really well. So for me, the era with Hogan and Bischoff when they came in, I found quite fascinating, and that's when I actually met the people at Impact. It's about 2010, 2011, because when I was at North, I'd reached out to a range of different sports, trying to find the sports or the brands that were not the number one. So at North, we were trying, how do we get it to be a bigger club if we're not, don't have the biggest audience and geographically and all that. So I'd reach out to different sports, and Impact was one of them. And I'd had some great chats. That's where I met Michael Weber. Even had a brief chat with Dixie, and how do you compete when you got the big behemoth around you? And so I certainly enjoyed that era, and in particular, I've always liked Jeff Jarrett. So I think I've probably followed Impact consistently, and in the last few years I've been lucky to go a few different times, and it's interesting because it's not like it's the matches that stand out, but it's the consistency of what they deliver. I think as a wrestling fan, I really enjoy it.
Even like 14, 15, they had this kind of awkward identity crisis, and then, the networks and all the stuff that I'm sure you're glad at this point that you don't have to deal with for this tour. But that's around the time where, they basically, became the brunt of the joke, but I was still sitting there waving my Impact flag. But that's also where I think.
And I think it's always good. I have the view that if you're a wrestling fan, of course you should critique what I do and what others do and the product and all of that. But I don't understand where people really bag the product to
Because it was more on the business side. It was very unfair to the on-screen product that was happening, I feel.
Yeah, and I think the fact wrestling has, different companies and diversity of what they do, I think that's one of wrestling's strengths because, probably most 99% of people are going to come through as a WWE fan at some point, right? So that's great.
Yeah.
But I think the ability then to sort of spread and touch into other wrestling companies and see different things and different talent, like it's a great thing, right? Like it's just how much time you've got to be able to watch it all. But yeah, Impact for me, when you ask it's funny because when you ask that sort of favourite match, it's like I've been watching it for 20 years and it's like been consistently part of my life without one particular match sort of jumping out. But certainly when that Hogan Bischoff era, even with when Bully Ray became Bully Ray. So there's and then obviously everyone knows about AJ and all that sort of stuff. So, but one of my most favourite moment recently was seeing Scott D'Amore do a Canadian Destroyer, and I saw that live, and that is one part that I will guarantee everybody today. I have no desire to get in the ring at all. I have no desire to be a character. I have no desire to be. I'm going to carry a sign that says, I don't take bumps, and because I looked at it and go, here's the guy he was running the show, I think it was the pay-per-view and then the TV taping, and he's getting in the ring, and I thought, I worked in sport 20 years. I've been in the grandstand a lot. Yeah, I've been in the rooms afterwards. I've never been, going, I'm going to sit with a coach and start coaching, or, I'm going to run on the field for the next couple of minutes. So I have a lot of respect for what that was, and I was just, I don't know if I was blown away as a fan or a business person when I saw it. I was like, what? I'd just spoken to the guy about an hour and a half ago, and here he is doing a Canadian Destroyer.
It's funny. It's a completely different rant for another day, and believe you me, I've gone on multiple rants on this podcast about it. But that's one of those moves that everyone does now, and it's kind of lost its impact. Again, pardon the pun, but because of Scott's role, I think that's why it was such a huge thing for it, because of the way that he carries himself, both off-screen as well as on-screen. It made it that much bigger. So kudos to him. But you quickly mentioned that Hogan thing. That was around the time where Impact was originally meant to tour here, and rumour and innuendo, as Conrad would say, is that Hogan basically cost too much money and had to cancel the thing. I don't know. It's all alleged. Did you at all have a hand in that with your talks with Dixie, or was that after that?
No, at that stage it was very much for me just
putting toe in the
as
water.
a fan. I was, I got to meet Mike. I thought, geez, this guy's really smart. I could learn a lot from him. Hey, it's cool. I got to be, to see, backstage and be at one of their shows. But as the CIO at North Melbourne Footy Club, it was honestly, it never entered my head to be doing anything like this or even close to it.
Just real quick before we wrap it up and plug the rest of the tour and all the fun stuff. You mentioned, I don't know if it was you, but whoever runs the social media for Oceania Pro Wrestling did mention in the articles and stuff that there is plans for New Japan to hopefully come back sooner than later.
Yeah.
Do you have an idea of when that will be, or at least a goal in your mind of when that will be?
Yeah, well, I'd certainly with Farley be very keen. Again, he's a really cool. He's a very humble dude, actually. A lot of the people in wrestling that I've got to meet are very humble, even though they're not just really good talent or personalities, but really smart people, good people. So I think, I think it's trying to fight. The New Japan would have worked in Wagga. So really quickly, the reason we just had a few challenges when it came to getting the right talent that what we'd originally agreed to, and no one's fault. It's just a few things happened. There was injuries, and then other events for New Japan, and I think it's probably new it's new for everybody to do. Hey, when you do these sort of partnerships, you've got some key deliverables you need to meet, and if you can't, you don't bluff it and continue. So I hope New Japan will. I think they will be here at some point moving forward, and again, as in relatively soon. But that's for them to work through. For me, Fale and I think we'll do something sooner rather than later. We'll just go back to it might be through the Tamashi brand as well.
Well, I was just about to, sorry to cut you off, I was about to bring up the Tamahashi brand. I haven't been to one, obviously, because of my eye and all that fun stuff, but I had a friend go to a couple of the ones in Sydney, and I've heard nothing but good things about that brand specifically. So at least in some fashion, by the end of the year or next year, New Japan will still be coming back, but you've still got that on the cards to do, maybe not here in Wagga again, but something similar to what you're doing here with Impact.
Into a different location. I'd love to. I think, as I said, I think there's a lot of really good. Again, it's not ruling out the Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane.
Yes.
There's no doubt about that. They will play a role in these, but it is my model again looks more towards some of the markets that. You can produce an event and you'll get the attention that wrestling deserves. And that's what I found in other sports. So whether it's local media, doing something different, and again, the markets we would look at would be where an event like New Japan brand would go well. That again, if you're in whatever part of Australia you're in, it's not necessarily going to be easy to get to. So I get all of that, but where I'd love to be able to do something with them. Again, Fale would be the one I would work with. And I think the other thing, look, in a perfect world, and this is, I'm glad we're doing this event, but the challenges of doing these events on short notice, it is something that we want to avoid moving forward. Wrestling's a great, as we know, telling a great story. Even if you don't have matches, I think, when you can build up, for a longer period of time. And I think that allows, when you're doing some, different locations, I think it gives people more of a chance to sort of, plan things out as well. So the short answer with New Japan is definitely yes. I'd love to keep talking with the other companies that I've spoken to and find ways to, share the love and do keep, it's funny. I'm always interested in people's constructive opinions. So I don't have all the answers. So I'm trying to find it with what I know. And I think, finding the right model for, whether it's a GCW or New Japan or whoever it might be, there'll be different ways to make it work. And I think that's what I'm keen to do. So I think, I'd like, and even if it's not through me, getting more wrestling brands into Australia should be the goal, and trying to find ways that are as good as we can make it, but then sometimes it's like, it's not going to be a pay-per-view with 40 talent. It's going to be something different. So we will announce an OPW event again, a standalone event, probably in a month's time, and that will sort of give again a bit of a taste of what I'm trying to do, which will be different to this event.
We're just over half an hour, so I'll quickly pump out these last couple of questions.
Go for it.
There's a lot of ruckus happening in the hotel hallway right now.
The kids are either been in the pool or they're doing something.
So I'll go to the second last official question, and then we'll segue into the Aussie showcase and then hit the plugs and all that stuff. So I've got 5 core questions that I usually build the conversation around and then throw in whatever we're talking about, and then try and take this as natural as possible. But the 4th question on my core 5 is usually, because usually it's wrestlers I have on, and it's usually, if you were to be an ultimate mark and travel through time and whatever else, like, who's your ultimate opponent? You've obviously said no interest in taking bumps.
0.
If you were to take an ultimate Australian versus Impact card, if all the cards had been on the table, what's one match you wish you could have had on this tour? Because for me, I'm looking at like just characters, and my wife and I were like, we wanted to see Bonza and Moretti versus Decay, and obviously all those guys aren't there for whatever reasons. Obviously, visas and stuff, other people are booked in other places on the same night, but that was one that stood out for me. Is there anything Impact versus Australia that you want to...
That's a good question.
Because there's a lot of guys that, X Division specifically, like you've got Brooksy and Slex coming, Robbie Eagles...
Yeah, it's and those match announcements are pretty close. So it's a good question. Look, I was probably as I'm sort of learning the industry here as well. So I've got to know most of the key names, I think. But I'm still on a learning curve. So when people send me links and what they're doing, if they're Australian wrestlers, like I genuinely do look at it because I'm keen to know more. We've got a good mix, I think, of the talent. I think the Australian tag teams, I think, are heavily underrated in this country. So, what we could do with them moving forward. Maybe it's not for this event, but if there was a dream match, you know, putting one of the good Aussie tag teams in there, or as you said, like a Mick and Jack versus another, there's some good opportunities, and probably even the last week or two, I was thinking, you know, I didn't know much about PCO, but I've started to really like him, and I'm thinking, wow, the right matchup here, but we need an Aussie that we want to see get their ass kicked by him. So I'm not at that stage yet. So, but yeah, I think, look, to be honest, sorry, not to be honest, but as I think about it more, I've done a lot, you know, spoken a lot with Nick Aldis and Mickey James.
Yes.
So, and we'll have hopefully stuff to announce with them soon. So to be frank, we were really looking at what, you know, if I was thinking about this a month or two ago, like what it could be with Mickey. She then got injured. So, you know, I think Mickey James against a really high quality Australian female.
There's at least, obviously we're not going to list them all, but you could at least go, here's 10 wrestlers that Mickey could face, and then it trickle through. There's 50 odd women in this country that she could face, and there's, you know.
So yeah, so not for this event, but all I'd say is, you know, maybe
like my wife,
not as that far away.
She's a very big fan of Jessica Troy, and I'd argue that she's one of the best technical wrestlers at all. Male or female doesn't matter. Jessica Troy versus Mickey James on one of these shows, or a WSW show, would be a huge one for me. But
100%.
Obviously, we've got the Impact show Friday, Saturday. You've got the community events on Thursday, which will be, you know, announced, I'm assuming, in the next few days, closer for the actual.
Yeah, it's much more of a local focus, so we don't.
Which I'm looking forward to that very much so. But what can you tell us about the Sunday? Obviously, you've got the showcase and the podcast with Conrad, and then you've got your actual OPW show. So can we go through what's going to be? Because I've got a couple of friends that are actually announcing the actual Impact shows, and I'm very happy for them. But for the people that didn't get picked, that still get a chance to showcase what they're doing, what's happening on the Sunday?
So part of this model was, again, to try and do something a little bit different, put some obviously Aussie talent where we could on the main card, and then look at Sunday. So Sunday we'll start with the meet and greets with the Impact talent at around 11 a.m. And again, different, you know, a lot of the time the meet and greets are at the event. We're doing obviously as almost like a mini, you know, it's not a WrestleCon, but it's, you know, everyone together for a short space of time. That will then lead into around about 12:30. We'll do the Australian Showcase. So we're looking to announce that probably by the weekend. We've sort of reached out to the different people, amazing applications, and so we had so we'll be looking at maybe, you know, 6-7 matches there, really showcase those talent in front of Scott Conrad and obviously the fans that are there. So that will be that, and that was always something I was really keen to do, and I'm keen to continue.
So it's almost a unofficial tryout for Impact as well in a lot of ways when you look at it.
It just expands how many Aussies can get in front of Scott. So you'll see them on the main card, but you'll also see them in this, and then leading into the show with Conrad and Scott Demore with the business of wrestling. So and again, you know, if Impact's the number 3 brand in the world, or number 4, if someone, you know, wants to argue, then, you know, we do have the senior person from that company here, and who has a very very open mind as to what Australia could be, and therefore that's, you know, so the event really on the Sunday, so it's a free event for the first 2 for the meet and greet, and then so, you know, free to attend, then you buy your meet and greets, free to watch the show, and then the business of wrestling show is obviously for the keen fans, and they can either just watch the show or get to meet Conrad and do the meet and greet with him.
Now, I was under the impression there was an OPW show happening after the podcast as well. Is that still going ahead?
No, essentially the OPW show is
just going to be part of the
showcase. Yeah, okay. So it'll still be all part of the Impact Down Under brand, but and hopefully where and how that's distributed will also give people an indication of what I'm trying to do. So, you know, but you know, full credit, like this is an area I'm probably as interested in this as the international stuff, is to go, you know, how do you support the Australian promotions that are doing a really good job with the month-to-month events or similar? They then bring through the talent, and how do we find ways to give these talent a chance to be bigger and better? So, yeah, and it's, look, again, you know, I'll assess it after it and go, yeah, it worked, maybe should have done it a bit differently, and the like. But it's it's an important part of this, is to go from roughly think there'll be about 20 Australians that the Boss of Impact will see, and I am very confident something will happen from that will give an opportunity to Australians.
Surely.
Very, very confident.
But no, as I said, I'm extremely looking forward to this. I've been waiting, since 2009 when they announced they were coming down under, and I was, 14, 15 years old, and
I didn't know that. Like I must admit, I didn't realise they had announced they were going to come in 2010, and because I had this weird feeling that they had been here.
Because they had the Hulkamania tour around the similar time frame, but they were meant to do like a proper Impact one. They announced it and just didn't happen. And again, as Conrad would say, rumour and innuendo. I'm just a fan. I don't know. I can only believe the dirt sheets, which half the time,
Conrad's more than a fan. He's
Conrad's one of my favourite people to listen to. He's on that many podcasts now, I can't keep up. But the last official question before we go into all the plugs and let you just have the floor for however long you want. Yeah. I always like to end this on a fun fact. I usually go a non-wrestling question. Obviously, I don't know much about you other than you are a businessman and you have your hand in everything, so it could even come back to wrestling. But what is your favourite sport that you've ever had the privilege to be a part of?
In some ways I would say it is pro wrestling, right? Like it was when I've met others, and I've experienced this in the sports I've worked in. Sometimes you got to be really careful that you don't had people in hockey or baseball, footy or league that love that club or sport so much, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a good fit for that. Because sport, the business sport can be pretty tough as well and pretty brutal, and or things don't go your way, and it's like a divorce when it doesn't, death in the family type stuff. So, look, of all the sport, I do like the combat sports. I've always, again, I'm the person, I do not want to take bumps or get into fights. So I don't know why it's the case, but I do. I grew up loving boxing, and I sort of drifted off like a lot of people. Got a bit, can't keep track of who's who, and then sort of I found my way to the UFC when Brock Lesnar went into the UFC, right? So I think the UFC owed Brock a lot, because I think there's a lot of us that I wasn't paying any attention to it. Then I followed it, and
I was a very casual fan at that point because I had cousins that were into like just MMA and karate and just beating the crap out of each other in general. But I was the same. The moment Brock Lesnar made that transition, it was like, holy. Yeah. Even Punk, people can laugh at him because he lost or whatever, but the amount of eyes and money that he put in their pocket. Yeah.
I think if you're a hardcore MMA fan and you don't like wrestling, you should respect what wrestling's done for your sport. So, look, I've always liked the combat sports, but in a real traditional sense, I do love cricket, and I particularly love the Ashes. So, I really wanted to get Nick Aldis out here so an Aussie could beat him up and we could, call it an Ashes victory. But I do. Cricket's probably been, even though I didn't play much cricket as a kid, as a sport that I, as the traditional sports would go, that would probably be number one for me.
See, cricket and soccer were always the weird ones for me, where I'll watch just about anything on TV. I haven't watched AFL properly in years. I'm more just league and wrestling at the moment because there's just that much out there that it just consumes me. But cricket and soccer, I like, the old backyard cricket and the backyard soccer. Yeah. I love it, but I can only kind of tune in here and there when it's on TV. Like, I don't think I could watch like a full game of cricket. I can only watch like probably half or a quarter.
If you don't love cricket, it's very hard to bring you on the journey because it is a difficult sport to explain to people.
But no, absolutely. Like, I get it. It's just for whatever reason, as I said, I'm ADHD as well, so maybe all the bright lights and flashing colours from wrestling is why it sticks with me.
And look, when I took a break from working for that sort of 6 months, I did really enjoy the darts on TV, and I don't know if that's because I'm a wrestling fan, because I love the fact that the darts was a bit over the top. They come out to the theme music. They're hardly athletes.
That actually is something that I can watch, though.
And when you're like me, sometimes the challenge of working in sport is you forget the passion of it, and I tended to take too much of a business view, looking at it going, wow, they broadcast this really well, and this crowd is just pumped. How do you get people excited, barely able to see the dart, you're going to be looking at the screen, but, so I'm always, I don't really have a sport I don't like, but the traditional sport, cricket, pro wrestling and the combat sports is probably be where, if I'm flicking around and I need to find something, that they're the ones I want to sit back and watch.
Absolutely. Well, I once again, crack record, but I thank you for your time. Allowing me to have almost an hour of your time. But where can we find OPW and
Yeah,
If you
so
want to give a last plug for the tickets, and I'll try and remember to link them all.
yeah, no
all
dramas.
the fun stuff. The floor is yours, man. You can take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 seconds.
It's been obviously we've tried to pull it really quickly together, so it hasn't gone 100% smoothly, but largely speaking, obviously you can get to impact.com or impactwrestling.com, Oceania prowrestling.com. I couldn't get the OPW.com website. Someone else has got that, so unfortunately it's a little bit longer, but pretty easy to find. And look, what the next, this event in Wagga is it's a good starting point. That's what it's about. We'll hopefully deliver a good event. We'll get a lot from it. As I said, for people that are within the region or around the region, I'm really hoping can get behind it because, as I said, I know that if you're in these regions, you've got to travel all the time to get to events. So Friday and Saturday night from 7 o'clock, there are world title matches. There are storyline linked matches. So it's not a house show. There will be stuff that will happen. Obviously, there's been some title changes. And then the Sunday show, which is free to everybody who's been on Friday and Saturday. Come along and see some of the better Australian talent, do the meet and greet, meet the Impact wrestlers. And if you can afford to and you want to hang around for and go to the Business of Wrestling show, it'll be a really intimate affair. So it'll be, people will get a great chance to hopefully ask questions and talk to two really influential people in the business. But hey, it's a starting point. Again, I'm always open to ideas. If you're a troll, you can just go away. But if you're somebody that wants to, hey Cam, have you thought about this? And I'm open to it. I found the last thing I'll leave people with is, every sport I've worked in, the first 12 months, so I'm about halfway through it, is where you try and absorb as much as you can, and then you start to work through right. This is how the industry works. This is what I'm thinking. How can we make things happen? So, and obviously if you can't get to the event, Fight TV, it'll be broadcast on.
Fantastic streaming service as well.
Yeah, great. Well, obviously I've talked enough about Michael Webber, so, it's I think it's pretty well priced for both shows in particular. And again, it's showcasing that we can do things in this country that you take for granted here, but sometimes it is, showing the world that, we can convert a basketball stadium into a wrestling ring. We're not creating WrestleMania, but we are creating a nice boutique starting point to go. Let's open the door. I'm very confident that AEW will tour here at some point, and I think this is just Australian fans. We should get behind the wrestlers, the companies, and everything else, and hopefully this will. If you can't get there, definitely look at it on Fight. There's a bit of merchandise that'll be out there next week as well. So, and hey, Impact Wrestling is give them a lot of credit. They've stepped in on short notice, and I think they'll do a really good job.
I will just say real quick as well, not to put myself over or anything, but I actually have had a tour of that venue because I was looking at doing stuff here myself, but way out of my price range at the moment. But the guys that run that, they gave me a tour, and I can pretty much picture in my head exactly how that's going to be set up to a point because they kind of helped me out. But I would say anyone that can get there to come, because even where I am up in the cheap seats, obviously that's more for safety reasons with my eye, unfortunately, there's not a bad seat in the house in that venue. It is a beautiful venue, state of the art.
Yeah, it's really
and I think it's probably going to look amazing on the stream as well for those that can't come.
Yeah, and when people say why here and why that, so one of the reasons is to show these venues as multi-purpose. So it's good basketball, netball. I'm thinking about the local games tomorrow night, and that's its primary purpose, which is great. So. But when you think of other sports and again, I've worked in them and probably been as guilty of this, can sometimes be a bit arrogant about what they need. We need this sort of surface or court or whatever. What I really like about wrestling's ability is to go, well, let's try and make it happen, right? Yep. Got an indoor space. All right, that's not perfect. Let's do this. And that's also part of this model that, if we want more wrestling content in Australia, I think it can be created when we show people to go, it's not Rod Laver Arena or it's not, Kudos Arena, but you turn to basketball stadium or, an event I'll announce, in maybe 4 or 6 weeks will be a good indoor venue. People go, oh, yeah, I think you could do wrestling there. And so it's about trying to find a way, I think, that wrestling's such an adaptable product. And again, as much as I'm a fan, I think more of it from the business side. So I look at the strengths and go, there's not an arrogance. People will try to make it work. All right, it's not. And as you said before, I think wherever you're seated, you should get a good look at the show. And as I said, we've certainly had some challenges, but that's just more the known things of again, it's never had an event like this. So, but that's. Like, I don't harp on it, but when you're in this model, you're trying to show people, in this case, government, both local and state, to go, give wrestling a chance. Wrestling can help do things that other sports won't do, or they'll do it arrogantly, or they'll do it in a, you can get the leftovers. So, I joke, a lot of regional markets get the practice matches, and it's like, why can't they get the real thing?
Yeah, well, any WWE house show, they're always great, but it's basically the same match every night. And that's one thing that I loved about when Chris Jericho came over. He was basically like, F your rules, I'm doing this match here, and here.
Talk about a guy doing it differently, right?
I got to see him versus Finn Balor in Sydney, whereas he did a tag match elsewhere. And I was just like, that's the one thing that sticks out, because everything else, it was great. But to me, I was just like, this dude was like, no, if I'm going to be in this country, very much on the business side, was like, let's make some money, right?
Look at Jericho. He's doing wrestling on a cruise ship, right? So, I think that outdoors is always a scary thing, but for wrestling, I think with lights and weather, but
I've gotten a couple of sunburns in my very short tenure as it is.
But again, I just look at the wrestling is what so it's an adaptable product, and generally speaking, the people in it are. How do we make it work so it's glass half full, not half empty? You go, we can't do that because you've got a sign in the wrong spot, and therefore if you don't change it, we can't come. And so that's what I'm going to try and do. I'm going to try and find ways to keep leveraging the benefit, the assets, of wrestling, and work with people that know the industry, and bring my little skills to it, and we'll see where we get to.
One last thing I will just say, just in case I do forget to say it in the outro when I edit this at home, is, speaking of plugging the socials and all that stuff, the website, obviously people are coming from all over.
Yep.
But you guys did, for the Melbourne, Sydney, Canberra, people that live central, or at least travel central, there is a full, basically, diagram from all three of those cities of how to get to the centre of Wagga. And obviously you can find yourself to the Equex Centre pretty easy from there. I mean, everyone has GPS these days as it is, but kudos to you guys for throwing that out there. My wife and I were posting that everywhere because we got friends from Canberra, Sydney, Melbourne, all over. So we're just like,
the social media team did a great job with that. They're
probably getting sick of me tagging them in everything, but I'm just so excited that I was interviewing you that I'm like, hey, this is happening.
And again, it's like just keeping people aware of. Everyone knows. I think where things are, and again. If it's too far, it's too far, right?
It is what it is. But
I get that.
We're making it easier.
But for others, and I'm actually surprised how many people are driving, mainly because I've had most of the jobs I've done. You just fly everywhere, and then when you start doing the numbers and going, all right, well, 4 or 5 hours, maybe have a break, maybe I'm going to stay overnight somewhere. But then I go, you know what? You check into an airport, and you hang around, and it gets delayed or luggage, and I'm going. Is it really that much? Am I getting here any quicker than if I actually drove? From Melbourne, and so I think, look, I think, and I got to give credit to the council here. I know everyone doesn't love governments, but regional councils
done a beautiful job.
Look, regional councils are just there. They try and get behind things, and especially when it's an event, because they're trying to make it both a combination of we want to attract visitors, but we also want to give something back locally, right? The Riverina region is a significant part of Australia. It doesn't hurt just to have that as an outcome.
Well,
people from the region can go.
The amount of people that when New Japan was originally announced. Just lost their mind because it was on the local news. Even my mother-in-law literally rang me and she's like, "Did you see this? Did you see this?" She's trying to connect to me because I'm just a massive, mark. And she was so excited. She was almost considering going, but unfortunately she's got the other stuff on that weekend now. But she was like, that's so cool. Like, this is,
Yeah, and
like,
look,
because it's coming to, again, not a super small town, but it's still a small regional.
It's everything's scalable, right? And but then when you think about two of the big markets, or three, the US, UK, and Japan, they do run shows in smaller markets, right? Like that is part of the wrestling model, is to go, maybe we're a little bit quirky or a bit left of centre or whatever it might be, niche product. Let's not just get lost in the shuffle sometimes of the, as we know, the biggest sports in the biggest cities. And sometimes that is because there's local media, there's local business. I've had a couple of really good business. Kennard's Hire, I've got to give them a plug. They've done a great job with us. And so there's, I think this is a model that can work. Won't work for everything. Won't be the, I said WWE are not going to go to, Alice Springs next year. Let me break that news.
Unfortunately not.
Yeah, but either's the NBA.
Yes.
And by the way, the NBA still haven't come to Australia yet, right? So in for a fully fledged match. So, and again, I think this is wrestling's ability to go, we can compete with where the bigger brands go too far, too expensive. An NFL game, it'll probably happen in Australia at some point. It'll be one game, over 20 years.
Yeah, well, there was rumours of the NFL coming to, I think it was Canberra next year. I know the NHL was coming to Canberra.
Yeah.
And then I think NFL was coming to, it might have been Sydney for the NFL.
Yeah, so the NHL,
getting
they're
them
going to...
confused, but yes.
They're going to do a couple of games, I think, in Melbourne in September. And so bringing anything to Australia is always either really challenging, financially, logistically, and I think wrestling can find a way to impress people to go, wow, that was cool. That was a good fit for our market, or a good fit, But let's see what happens. As I said, I think it'll be Impact again. They've done a great job on short notice, and I think, and again, New Japan would have been great. I've got all the respect for those guys, and said with Vale, and something will happen there at some point. So let's think what Australia can be in the wrestling industry in the next 10 years, and shit, we might make a few things happen.
Well, I've taken up an hour of your time.
No, you've done well.
Thank you very much, Cam.
I appreciate the opportunity.
I cannot wait to see these shows. But
cool.
We'll hit stop here, and just thank you very much.
Beautiful. No worries. Thank you.
All right. How awesome was that? Once again, as I said in the conversation, crack record. Thank you to Cam. I'm going to keep saying it just because that's the kind of person I am, but all the fun stuff coming to Wagga Wagga, New South Wales. Whoa, radical, man. I almost feel like I should have asked Cam this in the conversation, but I feel like part of that was just so that the American wrestlers could keep saying it, because Ace Austin said it like 4 times in his promo. But thank you for Cam. I'm so excited. Mrs. Crossfire is so excited. You all should be excited for a 4-night spectacular Wagga Wagga of all places. Impact Wrestling for the first time ever coming down under. Make sure to check all of those socials and the website that Cam mentioned. I'll link the socials and all the ticket sales links in the description as well. If you're not there, where the bloody hell are you? That's a classic Aussie thing. I don't know why that just popped in my head, but here we are. I can't wait to see all of you guys there. It's going to be an awesome show. I'm going to mark out. I'm probably going to lose my voice. And also, this coming weekend, it'll be the day after this episode drops, ICW Australia will have InsaneAsylum, which is our biggest show of the year, and I'll put the link for tickets and that below as well. Obviously, hate to admit it, but look, we're not as big as Impact, but it is what it is. I have 2 stacked weekends in a row, and I am so excited. So I'm probably going to need a nap in like 2 weeks after you've listened to this. But yeah, just thanks again to Cam for coming on. Speaking of links, though, don't forget to check my Linktree, all of my socials, my Pro Wrestling Tee store, and if you're feeling like being a Glucose Guardian, my Amazon wish list. Caution on oblige, but it is sitting there. And yeah, the song of the week was We Own the Night. Of course, the Impact Wrestling theme song. Match of the week, Alex Shelley versus Chris Sabin, Genesis 2009. Holy shit, I am getting old. I'm 30 next year, holy crap. But yeah, absolute banger after banger coming up, and I cannot wait. So excited to meet all of the Impact stars. So excited to hear Conrad's podcast, and of course the huge, Aussie wrestling showcase that myself and Cam talked about, and hopefully seeing some people get signed off the back of that. But once again, thank you to Cam. As I said, crack record. That was making an impact. I am John L. Crossfire, and you lovely human being, you were just caught in conversation. Ka-chow!